Hi Sandy, how are you?
I am well, thanks, and how are you?
I'm very well. Welcome to Speak Up for Oneness program.
Thank you.
So we're going to find out a little bit about your background. Can you tell me just about your background, where you've come from to this point, just roughly?
I was born in South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, and we lived in a lovely family home. When I was 8, we had gone away on holiday. Coming home from holiday, we had a nasty car accident where I sustained several injuries, and spent a good probably 3 months in hospital as a result of that. I had a fractured skull, fractured nose, neck, elbow, wrist, femur, etc. And I, as a result of the head injury, later had, post several surgeries and so on, I had a case of meningitis and encephalitis, which apparently resulted from the head injuries. And so I spent a good bit of time in hospital then as well. I then had basically a healthy life from then onwards and have been fine, have 2 daughters. And we moved to Australia in 2009 and have been here now nearly 8 years. In the process, well, subsequently to moving to Australia, I met a friend named Jenny, and she introduced me to Jane and Dave. And in the last year, I've had a lot of pain in my leg, which had been broken when I was 8. And they have helped me through Dave channeling Ranjit, and Jane's meditations have helped me to cope with subsequent pain and arthritis that has been holding me back and so on. And so I've basically rejoined my journey now. I had studied metaphysics many years ago in South Africa, and so I was actually really pleased to meet up with Jane, who has then helped me to find my way on my path again.
That's fabulous. It's interesting, isn't it, the pathway we take through life and how things can come back to us. So an injury from 8 years old comes back now.
Yeah.
And that helps you to revisit your journey, as you said.
That's right.
Okay, let's look at some of the critical turning points. You briefly mentioned them in your introduction there. Can you talk about some of these critical turning points in your life?
If I speak about the car accident, I've had a number of people who've often asked me how I felt as an 8-year-old being in hospital for so long and being separated from my family, because we are a close family, and how I dealt with being away from home and so on. When I think back to it, I don't really remember any form of stress or unhappiness or any form of concern or fear being in hospital, although my parents were only permitted to visit at visiting hours. Even in those days, parents staying was definitely not allowed. And I remember feeling comfort then, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I do believe that my guides were with me and were giving me that comfort and making me feel warm and confident within what I was doing.
When you say guides, what do you mean?
My spirit guides.
Okay, and how do you know about spirit guides?
I just felt them. And
what does it feel like, if you don't mind me asking?
It just feels very warm and comforting, and gives you an understanding of the experience that you are going through. And rather than feeling nervous for what is to come, just the strength to cope with what you're doing at the time. And I was flat on my back the whole time I was in hospital, and still flat on my back subsequently to coming out of hospital. And I just felt them there, just giving me that comfort, and it's okay to be here. It's all right.
For people who don't know anything about guides and who may sort of just speculate that, maybe it was just a child feeling warm and, somehow supported, how could you differentiate from a child's feeling of that sense of warmth and this perception that you had spirit guides around you?
It's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I feel that the children, when I was moved from the intensive care into the children's ward in the hospital, I suddenly had a lot of hustle and bustle around me, and wasn't as focused on, I wouldn't say on myself, because I wasn't focused on myself. It was, my focus became around, more to do with the children who were around me, and they were all very nervous and very uptight and didn't have a stillness or a calmness about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that in a criticizing manner.
No.
It's just purely an observation. And I didn't feel that nervousness and that discomfort within myself, and I almost felt an interesting feeling of being there as a support and comfort to them, because I would chat to them while their parents were out of the room and so on, and find out who they were and what they were about and all that sort of thing. And perhaps that's what it is, that perhaps that's the difference, is that I felt that comfort, and I was, hopefully, I don't know whether I was able to, but I hope I was able to give them that comfort, or at least a little bit of comfort for what they were coping with and what they had to face. Most of the time those children were purely in for a day. I was in for a long time. Perhaps it just became a home away from home for me, whereas for them it wasn't. And I couldn't even say that it was a preparation by parents or anything, because it was total shock. It was as a result of an accident, so there was no preparation time for it. So,
if I could ask, what sort of injuries did you sustain through the accident?
My skull was fractured. I pushed the rear windscreen of the vehicle out with my face, and so I had a fractured skull. My nose was broken, my neck was fractured, my left elbow was badly fractured where it had to be reconstructed, my wrist was fractured, and my femur on my left leg was fractured. And I had many weeks of traction, and in fact I think it might even have been months of traction, before they were able to relocate the joint, the break in my leg, and then only after that we were able to dress it and put a plaster cast onto it. So yeah, I wasn't going anywhere quickly. I had a lot of healing to do. So yeah.
Did you have an out-of-body experience in that accident? Or was that in future accidents?
No, I do think I did. But I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't understand it, because this sort of thing was not discussed at that time. I do seem to remember watching the flurry after the accident from above. And I don't know, but I have a feeling that I might have shown my mother where I was, because having been thrown out of the car, I was thrown, I'm told, 72 feet and landed face down in a farmer's cow field.
Wow.
And I'm not certain, but I have a feeling I might have guided people to where I was so that I could be found. And I was then carried on the unbroken rear windscreen of the car up to the road where an ambulance could come and meet us and take us to the hospital. I was then, a few days later, my parents and my brother were taken to Johannesburg in an ambulance, but I was too seriously injured for an ambulance. So I was fortunate that my uncle had a plane, and he and his wife flew to Vrede, where the accident happened, and flew me from there back to Johannesburg.
Had they not had a plane, would you have died?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
I'd like to believe I wouldn't, because I think I've got a lot still to do in this lifetime. So I'd like to believe that I would have survived no matter what, simply because I have had more than one opportunity of, or not opportunity, but more than one occurrence in my life which has been serious illness or serious injury, and I have chosen to be here still.
Yep.
So,
is there anything else you'd like to say about that experience? Anything else you'd like to share, or should we move to the next experience that you had that was a critical turning point?
I think that is about all. I had several surgeries after the accident to reconstruct and to repair parts of my body that had been badly broken. And support from my parents, a great deal of support from my parents. Also, there was one situation where the doctors put a great deal of pressure on my parents to allow me to go through a surgical procedure where I would have been the guinea pig in the world for this procedure.
Wow.
Where they wanted to basically put a barrier between my brain and my sinuses. It would have meant taking the front of my forehead off, doing the surgery, and there was a 50% chance of whether I would survive. Well, I suppose you wouldn't say 50% and then list three things, but there were three different outcome possibilities. Either that I would not survive, alternatively that I would be severely brain damaged because they would be pushing my brain back into the brain cavity, out of the sinus cavity. Alternatively, I might have survived and been exactly as I am now. My parents chose not to go ahead with the surgery, which I feel was the right decision, because to have the other two alternatives was a no-go, considering although I have a brain injury, I am not brain damaged, I am not disabled in any way, and I feel that they made the right decision in that situation. And yeah, that was basically just the other, I think the final big thing that was as a result of that accident, that subsequently to that, other than the illness that I had later, was I think all good.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
What was another critical point in your life?
When I was 12, I had been at school as per normal 12-year-olds, standard 5, which here I think is year 7. And I had come home from school not feeling fantastic. I had pain in my legs and a headache and just generally wasn't feeling well, and didn't really worry about it because that was what I did. I didn't like to concern people about how I was feeling. I preferred to just deal with it myself. The next morning I had been awake during the night and with a terrible headache and horrible nausea, and I had got up and got myself some headache tablets and gone back to bed, and just didn't start feeling better. I just was feeling worse and worse and worse, and eventually I thought, right, well, now maybe I should speak to Mom. Went back to the bathroom again, and she heard me moving around, and she said, am I okay? And I said, well, I'm not feeling that good, but I don't know why, I don't know what's wrong. She had to go to work that day, which must have been one of the most difficult things for a mother to do, seeing your child who's really, really ill. And she must have realized I was very ill because she had phoned my gran, my dad's mom, who had driven over to be with us that day to take me to the doctor. They had spoken to our GP, who had effectively referred me immediately to a pediatrician. We'd gone to the hospital and I was admitted immediately. They didn't know what was wrong, but they thought that it was the meningitis. And I can remember being in a delirious state, but still being aware of them speaking and discussing what was wrong with me and what was happening. And I remember the doctor and my parents discussing the fact that I had meningitis, that they had done a lumbar puncture on me earlier, which I had remembered. That was not pleasant.
No, I've heard it's very painful.
I don't remember it being painful. I just remember being just not wanting it done because I couldn't see the needle going in. And when I have an injection, I like it to be somewhere that I can have the needle go. I can see the needle. So I wasn't happy that I was having this into my spine, and that was the only thing I just couldn't see when it was, that I couldn't see when it was going to go in. And so I remember them discussing the fact that I did have meningitis, which was what the doctor had previously suspected, but that I had the underlying issue of having encephalitis at the same time, which apparently is unusual. And I remember my spirit guide was very bored and he was playing and swinging on my drip stand.
So when you say that, were you actually seeing the spirit guide?
I was unconscious at the time, so I wasn't visually seeing him. I just knew he was there.
Right.
And just playing around in the room, in the ward. The first thing I remember when I came out of the delirium was a sister. My parents had organised a private sister to sit with me while they couldn't be there. And I remember coming through, and it must have been morning, and she was telling me what she had for me for breakfast. That was probably the best bacon and eggs I've ever eaten. So apologies to Mom, she makes wonderful bacon and eggs too. But that was just a memory, and I remember having those bacon and eggs at the time.
Going back to the spirit guide, have you ever had a visual image of these guides or guide?
The visual image I've had has been somebody in a white cloak, hooded, and I have no idea what their face looks like, what they look like. Purely a group of people in white hooded cloaks.
So you see a group, so it's not just one spirit guide, it's a group of them. Did you see that through meditation, or did you see that just through being awake and seeing a group?
That was through meditation.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you know that that wasn't imagined?
It might have been, but I don't think that it was, because it felt very comfortable and they felt familiar.
I was going to ask you that. Was it the same comfort that you felt as an 8-year-old?
Yeah, it was.
And do they come in and out? Like, in other words, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, and you can feel a difference?
No, they are always there.
They're
always there. I always feel them around me, but I'm not always consciously aware of them being there. As in, they don't crowd me, but I just know that they are there.
So you're sitting here now, you can feel them now? Do you feel them in a part of the room, or do you feel them right around the room, or
just
next to you?
within myself.
Within yourself? Okay. And it feels comforting? Anything else?
I don't necessarily think so. I don't know. Yes, it must. I think it is very comforting, because I was nervous before.
You're not now.
And I'm not now. So, yeah.
Do they ever speak to you?
In my dreams, yes, or else in the early hours of the morning, I have had messages from them. And I have previously asked questions, as in, why do I need to do this? Why should I be doing this or that? And I have had answers explaining things to me. The first time I became aware of that was when was just before I had studied metaphysics in Johannesburg, and my sister had been trying to persuade me that this is what I needed to do, and I said, oh, for goodness sake, no, I don't need to do that. She said, well, just think about it. And I woke up one morning and I thought, what's going on? Because I was getting this clear image in my mind and clear message that yes, I should, and that it gave me a date on which I should begin, and that happened to be the first metaphysics date back post the school holidays, because I'm a very involved mom, and at that stage my children were still at primary school. So I had this vision that I needed to start on that particular day. It also gave me a complete rundown of the class, of what the lesson would be. And so I then spoke to my sister the following day, and I said to her, right, tell me, when does metaphysics start again in the new term? And she told me, and I said, and what is the module that we would be discussing or would be doing in that class? And she told me what I had visualized that morning at 3 a.m.
Well, that's evidence, isn't it?
Definitely.
You can't imagine that.
No, definitely not.
Was there anything else that you can remember where it was very clearly something that preempted something else, where they said something to you and then it happened?
There have been several times that I have met people. Either I have thought about somebody that I know and then bumped into them, or they phoned me. But I think something that has often come into my mind is when my children were at primary school, my older daughter wasn't looking forward to primary school necessarily, because it meant a change and structure, etc. And she was very nervous as to who her teacher would be. And we had met the teachers at the school on the open day, and I then frequently bumped into one of those teachers in the shopping centre that I went to, and lo and behold, that was the lady who became Megan's teacher. And subsequently to that, every year I had the same thing happening, that the teachers in the grade of the next, in the grades following, would always be in the shop when I was in the shop, and I would always greet them and so on, and it happened every single year. So I knew, I didn't make it known because I didn't want there to be an expectation that could be broken, but I kept it to myself, and I knew that that was the teacher she would get the following year.
So why would you be shown something like that? Why would they think that's important for you? Was that a proof?
I think it was more proof and evidence rather than anything else. I must say that there were times at which I felt comfort knowing who the teachers were going to be. But I wasn't going to share that. So therefore, I don't know why it happened. I think it was purely to prove to me that this is what I can do.
Was there anything else that you would like to share that, whilst we're on this subject, that comes to mind where you feel they were communicating with you and it really surprised you, or you just went, wow, that's comforting, that's great?
There have been so many times.
I was just thinking warnings. What about warnings where you've been protected?
I wouldn't say that necessarily that there have been warnings, but there have been times at which I have been intending to go places and just for unknown reasons have been delayed, whether the phone has rung or the garage door wouldn't open or the car wouldn't start. Whatever the reason might have been, I've been delayed.
Mm-hmm.
And then travelling down the road that I would have travelled, there has been a very serious car accident and I've been prevented. And at the time, frequently those accidents have happened within the last 5 minutes because there weren't emergency vehicles around yet. And I would have been there had I left on time. So those have been prevented by the fact that I've been delayed.
So what would you say to other people? Do you think everybody has a guide, or?
Yes, I think we do. We just, some of us are not necessarily, to say open-minded is not the right way to put it, because we're all open-minded, but we all have teachings within us. And we are taught as children specific ways to be, which are socially acceptable. And certainly when I was growing up, speaking about spirit guides and so on was not socially acceptable. Speaking about healing with your hands was not socially acceptable. So therefore, I always kept it very much within myself. Experiences that I've had, which I haven't even discussed with my parents. For example, visualizing myself and feeling myself purely as energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was as a child. I've only realized that's what it was now, when I now can specifically do these things where I can leave my body, where I can experience myself as energy willingly, as opposed to it being just purely an experience that I haven't instigated.
Can you tell us a little bit about leaving your body? On what occasions has that happened?
Well, it's happened a number of times. When I was convalescing after the car accident, I used to see myself, and it used to terrify me, absolutely terrify me. I used to see myself at the top of a very high dome of library books. And I would be climbing this dome, and I was okay. I wasn't afraid while I was going on the vertical part of the dome, but then, of course, the dome goes rounded at the top. And there would always be a hole or a window at the top of the dome, and I was aiming for that window. And I would be afraid when I would start climbing across the horizontal part of the dome, and that would generally be when I would start shouting and calling myself or something like that, and then I would come back to my body again.
When you say crawling across the horizontal, I'm sort of imagining the horizontal.
Not quite horizontal, but the sides of the dome are vertical, but as they come together and meet at the top.
And then you come back.
The window, and then
just before.
Yeah.
Why do you think you did that?
Because I was afraid.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was beyond there, and I didn't know whether I would make it across that area or not, or make it to the window, because my feeling was if I could get to the window, I would be fine. I could get out. But if I couldn't get to the window, and if I fell, what would happen?
Mm.
And my nightmares were always of falling, and some of them would be falling through the earth and so on. And interestingly, a guided meditation that I did a little while ago, the introduction to the meditation was to lie on a purple bed and to allow yourself to fall through the bed, which was my nightmare as a child. And I'm thinking, I can't believe that I'm actually doing this while I'm awake, but in a meditative state. I had to go through the bed and then through all the layers of the earth to the core of the earth, and that is exactly what my nightmares were. And I feel that having done this meditation, that the nightmares were nightmares because I didn't understand what it was that was happening, that you actually could make that journey. Now I understand it, and I can look back on those nightmares and think, well, if I could say to that child, it's not a nightmare, it's something that you can actually do out of choice. And I think that it possibly was part of my journey to be at one with earth, because it's becoming part of the earth, because you're entering through the crust of the earth into the realms of the wholeness of earth. And I think that sort of is an understanding I have now, which I didn't then.
So today you feel more at one with the planet?
I do, yeah.
So do you feel a sort of an inner change since
Definitely.
you had that? You do?
Yeah, definitely.
So when you go and you look around, looking at trees and nature, how do you see it now?
I appreciate it a great deal more, whereas before they were just there. Now I know that those trees are there for our benefit, and everything on the earth isn't just there by chance. It was put there to benefit both the earth and humankind, because when we grow, we need to be grounded. We need to have our feet on the ground in order to be able to grow and to be able to walk the path that we need to walk. And through the trees and through the birds, etc., the birds often give us guidance through the trees. And I feel that when we don't really know and aren't aware of what's happening with the earth, that the trees can feel like a dark forest. But then what I have found is I don't have that fear of the forest anymore. I feel that I can now walk through the forest because I know that there is guidance. I know that there isn't something evil happening or waiting for me around every tree stump or tree trunk or something. I love to listen to the birds. I like to I just like to be within the realms of nature and to enjoy being outdoors and so on. I don't know that there's that much of a difference necessarily in the way I look at things now in comparison to before, but I just think I'm more aware of the little things in nature as opposed to just being the big things out there.
I smile as the next question you and I have talked about.
Yes.
Which is to do with your fear of clowns. And I saw the dark clown in the dark forest.
Yes.
Do you think there could be a way of creating a meditation around us facing our fears? So, for example, if you were able to, in meditation, to approach a clown, would you be able to see it in its innocence?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe
That's really, you've actually already travelled some way.
I have, yes.
Because when we first met, you were really scared of clowns. And of course I am one, so you're stuck with one now.
You know, you as a clown, that puts clowns in a totally different realm.
So that just shows you how powerful our fears are, doesn't it? You know, and clearly through your meditation of going through that purple table into the earth, which was a nightmare, and then you willingly, what helped you to willingly embrace that fear and then go into the earth like you expressed? What made you decide to do that?
I think I looked at it more as an adult.
Yes.
It was a recorded guided meditation, so I could have stopped it if I chose to, but I chose to rather continue because it was a series of meditations that I was doing and I wanted to get to the end of it. I wanted to reach the light stage after the end of the series of 6. And I think it was pure determination and also a realization of the fact that I am safe. This was in wakefulness, and it was chosen, as opposed to being while I was asleep and falling through the earth. I was now traveling through the earth. And to me, there is a difference between falling, which is involuntary, and traveling, which is choice. You can either...
So it's that fear, the fear is coming from uncertainty, I think,
Yeah.
as you mentioned before.
That's
and,
right.
Fear of having no choice. So something being forced upon you, whereas when you change your visualization in your mind, which is your, I guess, beliefs, would you say?
Definitely.
Then suddenly you're able to look at the very thing that you're afraid of in a different light. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
When you think about it.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So we can overcome probably any fear if we're prepared to look at it.
Oh, definitely. We can
And have power.
we can overcome all sorts of things if we prepared to look at it. Just to put it into perspective, I am terrified of horses.
Right.
But I have not yet faced that.
That's next.
Yes, I have ridden horses. When I first was married to my husband, we did go on easy horse rides, and I was petrified, but I did it. Now I actually don't believe I would be able to do that now.
Wow. And how
But,
brave were you back then? So what do you think would be the barrier now?
I don't know what the barrier would
Do
be.
you walk past the horses? Or do you just go into nervous?
I can walk past them as long as I'm not too close.
Yeah.
My sister owns a horse.
Yes.
And I did go, when I was back in South Africa a few years ago, she did take me to meet her horse, or their family owns a horse, and they took me to meet him. And I was fine while my brother-in-law was between the horse and myself, but then the horse put his head over my brother-in-law's shoulder.
To say hello.
And they said, well, just put your hand like this, and I couldn't do it. I could not do it. So I need to address that fear within myself.
Yeah.
And to meditate on it in order to overcome it. But no, I don't like the idea of meeting a horse. However, before meeting you, I wouldn't have liked the idea of meeting a clown.
Yes, so there you go.
And then you said to me, I am a clown. And I thought, no.
No. Isn't that funny? Funny how life is.
It is, isn't it?
Well, next time you'd be meeting a horse.
Oh no.
But it'd probably be a little Shetland pony or something. Maybe a little tiny one.
That is okay. That is fine. It's not
Where
bigger
it's
than I
like-
am. I think it's the size.
I think you're right.
I think it's the size.
Yeah.
And that I don't understand horses.
That's what it is.
And I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it is. And that's
Because
their
I
fear.
don't know how to deal with horses.
So it's not that you're scared of the horse, it's you're frightened of the fact that you don't know how to deal, you feel
I
uncertain.
think so.
I think we've cracked it.
You could be right.
All fears are
I
uncertainty.
hope there's not a horse waiting outside for me.
Well, actually, I've only got horses in my car.
Oh, God,
That's to do with
yes.
the engine. So going back to the question, is there anything else that you would consider to be a critical turning point in terms of this sort of metaphysical oneness that we're talking about?
I think the other very big turning point in my life has been when we came to Australia, because we weren't running away from anything. We were happy in South Africa. We were fine there. And had no plans to make any form of move. And my husband then was working in Singapore for a year, and he said to me, I've been offered a position in Melbourne. Would you be prepared to take it? And I said, where is Melbourne? So anyway, we then were flown here and brought out to come and see what Melbourne was about and so on. Basically, what I had done was I just blocked it off completely because it was not something that I was planning, not something that I had in my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Although, just thinking about it, I used to read books, novels about Australia, and I always thought, oh, it sounds such a romantic place. I would love to live there. And I've actually only just thought about that now. So I dare say we manifest things.
Yeah, you do.
But what I did was I just thought about it, and because of the stress of the possibility of moving, I had basically, on the whole, shut down my spiritual side completely and was just dealing with practical day-to-day life. And all I did was I put it out to the universe, and I thought, I feel that it is the best move for my husband. I did feel it was a good move, although it would be very difficult for both our children. And I just felt I don't want to be the stopgap that will say, no, not going. I wanted it to be the right thing to happen. So I just left it. And I thought, right, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Our visas came through within 3 weeks, where it normally takes a few months. Everything happened. We then came here and we applied for permanent residency. And again, I was quite happy even then, 2 years down the line, to go back to South Africa. But I didn't believe it would be the right thing for the rest of the family. And I just felt I've got to not focus on me. I have to focus on what is right, what is going to be the best thing. Also knowing at the same time, when you have big decisions to make in life, the easy path is not necessarily the right path.
Yeah.
And again, I just thought, I just put it out to the universe and I said, what is going to happen is going to happen. Putting together all the paperwork for permanent residency was a nightmare. It took months of hard work from both my husband and myself. And when the final piece of paper was submitted, we were granted permanent residency on the same day.
Wow.
Yes. So it was meant to be.
Yeah.
It still has taken me a long time to come to terms, or not to come to terms with, that's not the right wording, but it's taken me a long time to get used to the idea of being here. And I've met a number of beautiful friends in the time that we've been here. Absolutely wonderful people. But subsequently to starting working with Ranjit and with Jane here, I think I have actually found the reason that I'm here, and that I have found a path, a way forwards, and am finally settled here. And although I have put up a lot of resistance, I actually believe that although 8 years is now about to pass,
Wow.
I do feel that I'm making progress and that I'm actually more settled here than I was previously. I just feel the comfort, more comfort, and I think a feeling of, I wouldn't say family because they're not family, but my friends have become my family here.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very special to me because it gives me a sense of belonging. And yeah.
Does comfort mean peace to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm.
Right. So